He trusted their friendly neighbor for months, until one quiet afternoon exposed what had really been happening between him and his wife inside his own home. When Marcus never thought anything unusual about living next door to Tom, the easygoing guy who moved in last spring. Tom was the kind of neighbor everyone liked, immediately helpful, polite, always ready to lend a hand with something small. At first, Marcus appreciated having someone like that nearby. He traveled for work sometimes, and it gave him peace of mind knowing Elena wasn't completely alone. She seemed comfortable around Tom, maybe even a little too comfortable, but Marcus never questioned it. Elena had always been friendly with people, and Tom didn't seem like the type to cross any lines. At least, not at first. Things shifted slowly, in that quiet way where nothing is loud but everything is slightly off. It started with small things: Tom's jacket draped over the back of their sofa, even though Marcus didn't remember him being over that day. Elena brushed it off, saying Tom stopped by to help her fix a loose shelf. Then it was Tom's shoes by the entryway. She said he came in only for a minute, but Marcus found them hours later, still sitting there like they belonged. These weren't red flags yet, just odd little details that moved through Marcus's mind without settling too deeply. Life continued as usual. Elena cooked, worked from home, chatted with Marcus about her day. Nothing appeared wrong on the surface, but things around the house started looking different, subtle shifts he couldn't explain. A glass left out with a drink Marcus didn't pour, a towel hanging in their bathroom that wasn't theirs, a tool set in the garage that didn't belong to Marcus but looked suspiciously like Tom's. Every time Marcus asked, Elena gave simple answers. Tom helped her fix something. Tom came by because she needed an extra pair of hands. Tom asked for advice. Tom dropped something off, and Marcus accepted it because the explanations weren't unreasonable. They just weren't complete. The moment things truly shifted came on a Tuesday afternoon when Marcus left work early because of a canceled client meeting. He didn't announce it to Elena. He thought it would be a nice surprise. He imagined walking in, maybe having lunch together, maybe watching a movie before she returned to her tasks. When he pulled into the driveway, he noticed Tom's truck parked neatly along the curb. Nothing strange about that. Tom lived next door, but the truck was closer to Marcus's walkway than to Tom's. Close enough that Marcus paused for a second. He stepped into the house expecting Elena's voice, maybe laughter if Tom was inside fixing something. But the house was quiet in a way that didn't match the time of day. He called Elena's name once, no answer. Not alarming, just odd. He saw two glasses on the kitchen counter, one hers, and the other with condensation still fresh. He checked the living room, empty. Then he heard movement coming from down the hallway, soft, muffled, not suspicious by itself, but enough to steer him toward the sound. Marcus walked down the hall and stopped near the closed guest room door. He hadn't expected to hear voices, but he did. Elena's voice, low, quick, nervous, like she was trying to keep something contained. And then a man's voice replied, also low, but undeniably Tom's. That was the first moment Marcus felt the shift inside him. Not panic, not anger, just a calm awareness that something was happening behind that closed door, something he wasn't supposed to walk in on. He turned the handle slowly, not kicking the door open or expecting anything dramatic. And what he saw wasn't dramatic, it was simply clear. Elena sat on the edge of the guest bed, her hair messy in a way Marcus hadn't seen that morning, her shirt slightly wrinkled, her face startled enough to say she wasn't ready to see him. And Tom stood too close to her, far too close for anything innocent. The room wasn't chaotic. It wasn't loud. It was just wrong. Wrong in a way that didn't need explanation. Wrong in a way that didn't require shouting or questions. Elena's expression alone confirmed everything, guilt mixed with shock, like she'd been caught a second earlier than she expected. Tom stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck, unable to look Marcus in the eye. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't ask why. He didn't accuse anyone of anything. He just stood there for a moment, looking at both of them as the truth settled naturally into place. Then he stepped out of the room and walked down the hallway without a single word said. Behind him, Elena finally whispered his name, but Marcus kept walking. The quiet of the house now made perfect sense. Marcus didn't slam a door or throw anything on his way out of the guest room. He simply walked back into the kitchen, breathing slower than he expected, as if his mind was catching up to a truth it had already accepted. Behind him he could hear Elena whispering something to Tom, quick, panicked words followed by hurried footsteps. She appeared in the doorway a moment later, her hair still tousled, her face unsettled in a way that confirmed more than anything she could say. She asked if they could talk. Marcus didn't respond right away. He just leaned against the counter and waited for her to speak first, because whatever happened in that room wasn't something he needed to define. She already had. Elena started by insisting it wasn't what it looked like, but even she didn't seem convinced by that line. She kept adjusting her shirt, as if smoothing fabric could smooth the truth. Her hands trembled. Her voice cracked in places she tried to keep steady. She said Tom had only been helping her fix the ceiling fan. She said they went into the guest room because it was quieter. She said they were just talking. Marcus listened, not interrupting, not challenging, just listening. And as she spoke, the timeline of her words didn't match anything he saw. It didn't match the way Tom stood, or the way she froze, or the way the air in that room felt more like a secret than a repair project. Tom walked out of the hall a moment later looking like someone who had walked directly into the wrong kind of problem. He muttered something close to an apology, though it came out poorly formed. He said he shouldn't have been there. He said he didn't mean for things to get weird. He didn't explain what weird meant, but Marcus didn't need him to. Elena quickly told him to leave, her voice sharp and shaky, and Tom nodded, grabbing his jacket from the sofa, the same jacket Marcus had noticed before, and heading out the door without meeting anyone's eyes. Once he was gone, the house felt heavier but not louder. Elena stood in the middle of the living room, unsure where to go or what to do with her hands. She tried again to explain, but explanations without truth sounded like static. She said things just got confusing. She said Tom had been around more often because she felt comfortable talking to him. She said she didn't realize boundaries were blurring. The phrasing was careful, almost too careful, like she was choosing words that made mistakes sound accidental rather than intentional. Marcus asked one question, the only one that mattered in that moment. How long has this been going on? Elena froze. She didn't answer immediately, and in that pause, Marcus felt the ground settle beneath the reality he had already pieced together. She finally whispered that nothing serious happened before today, but the way she said it made everything even clearer. You don't suddenly end up sitting too close to the neighbor in your guest room for the first time on a random Tuesday afternoon. Something had started long before Marcus walked through the door. Maybe small, maybe subtle, maybe something she convinced herself was harmless until it wasn't. Marcus didn't push her for details. He didn't ask for messages, timelines, explanations. He understood enough just from the way she looked at him, guilty, overwhelmed, cornered by her own choices. And strangely, he felt no urge to yell. The calm stayed with him, not because he didn't care, but because caring too loudly wouldn't change anything he'd already seen. Elena reached for him then, lightly, like she wanted to anchor herself to something familiar. He stepped back, not dramatically, just naturally, creating space that reflected the space that had already grown between them long before this day. She asked if he was going to leave. He didn't answer, not because he wanted to scare her, but because he didn't know yet. He only knew he couldn't pretend nothing had happened. He walked to the guest room and grabbed a pillow and blanket, not as a symbolic gesture, but simply because sleeping in the same room that night didn't feel honest. Elena watched him from the hallway, her eyes full of questions she didn't voice. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just watched him, the weight of the situation finally settling into her expression. When Marcus closed the guest room door, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, not thinking about Tom or even about Elena, but about how quietly trust can shift before you notice it's gone. And somewhere in the house, Elena paced softly, as if trying to figure out how everything she thought she could control slipped out of her hands in a single afternoon. Marcus woke early the next morning, though he wasn't sure he had really slept at all. The guest room felt unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable, just separate. And maybe that separation helped him think without the noise of emotion. When he walked into the kitchen, Elena was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked tired, but not in the dramatic, falling apart way. More like someone who hadn't figured out what to say after running out of excuses. She gave him a soft good morning, the kind that reached for normalcy, but Marcus simply nodded and poured himself a cup of coffee. The silence between them wasn't tense, it was informative. It told him everything that hadn't been said. Elena finally began talking, quietly, slowly, choosing each word, as if the wrong one might make things worse. She admitted that Tom had been helping her with things around the house more than she originally mentioned. She said they talked sometimes when Marcus wasn't home. She described it as comforting, which wasn't quite the word Marcus wanted to hear, but it was at least honest. She insisted nothing official had ever happened until yesterday. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. Her explanation already told him what he needed to understand. The line hadn't been crossed all at once, it had been creeping forward for weeks, probably months, shifting inch by inch until she no longer noticed where it was. After a while, Marcus went outside for fresh air. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of calm morning that would normally relax him, but today it just gave him space to think clearly. As he walked past Tom's driveway, he saw the man himself sitting in the cab of his truck, staring at his steering wheel like it held all the answers he didn't have. When Tom noticed Marcus, he stepped out immediately, looking uncomfortable but determined to say something. He apologized again, genuinely this time, without awkward excuses. He said he hadn't meant to disrespect Marcus or get involved in something he had no place being in. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't claim misunderstandings. He just admitted he should have known better, especially when he realized Elena was relying on him emotionally. Marcus listened without interrupting, appreciating the honesty even if it didn't fix anything. Tom said he planned to give Elena space and stay away for now. Marcus nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, it was just acknowledgement. When Marcus returned home, Elena was on the couch, holding her phone as if expecting something to appear on the screen. She asked if he had seen Tom. Marcus said yes. She waited for more, but he didn't offer details. She looked relieved and disappointed at the same time, as if part of her wanted closure and another part wanted answers she couldn't ask for. Throughout the afternoon, Elena hovered near Marcus, trying to read his mood. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, rearranged shelves that were already in order, and asked small questions just to break the silence. Marcus didn't ignore her, he responded when necessary, but he didn't pretend things were normal either. Eventually, Elena sat down beside him on the couch and asked in a quieter voice if he still wanted to be here. Marcus didn't answer right away. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He just wanted to think before saying something meaningful. He finally told her that he didn't know yet, that he needed time, that yesterday wasn't something he could process in a day. Elena nodded, looking down at her hands. She didn't argue or push. She didn't turn the conversation into something dramatic. She just accepted the reality of the moment, which in its own way showed more truth than anything she said earlier. Later that evening, Marcus walked past her office room and noticed something he hadn't seen before: a small photo tucked behind a notebook on her desk. A picture of her and Tom at a neighborhood barbecue months ago. Nothing inappropriate, just a friendly snapshot. But her expression in that photo, comfortable, open, almost lighter than he remembered her being with him recently, made something subtle in his chest. Not anger, not jealousy, just understanding. Understanding that she had been drifting before she even realized she was drifting. And understanding that Marcus had noticed the changes in their home long before yesterday but hadn't connected the pieces. He put the photo back exactly where it was and walked away, not with rage but with clarity. Elena didn't see him do it, and she didn't know he'd found it. But Marcus now knew something important. This wasn't a one-time slip. It was something that had grown quietly until it became unmistakable. And that truth, spoken or not, would shape what came next. He returned to the guest room that night, not because he was punishing Elena, but because he wasn't ready to return to a space that no longer felt honest. Somewhere down the hall, Elena lay awake too, not crying, not pleading, just realizing that things were not going to return to normal simply because she wanted them to. The next morning moved quietly, the kind of quiet that didn't come from tension but from two people trying to navigate around something they both knew was there. Elena made breakfast, not because she felt normal, but because routine gave her something to hold on to. Marcus thanked her but didn't sit at the table. He took his plate to the patio instead, needing the open air to think clearly. Elena didn't follow him, which he appreciated. She was starting to understand that space wasn't punishment, it was simply necessary. Throughout the day, she shifted between trying to stay busy and watching Marcus from a distance, as if measuring how much damage had been done. She didn't try to defend herself anymore. She didn't try to rewrite the story. Instead, she stayed quiet, waiting for him to give some kind of sign she wasn't sure she deserved. By mid-afternoon, Marcus stepped out for a walk. He didn't intend to cross paths with Tom again, but life in a small neighborhood has its predictable intersections. Tom was outside repainting a section of his fence, though the paint can beside him was still unopened. It was pretty clear he wasn't out there to fix anything, he just didn't want to be inside either. When he saw Marcus approaching, he paused, unsure whether to stay or retreat. Marcus gave him a nod, not friendly but not hostile, and Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He apologized again, quieter this time, more composed. He didn't try to explain anything new. He simply admitted that the situation had gotten out of hand and that he should have stepped away earlier. He didn't make himself out to be a victim or a hero. He acknowledged that Elena had leaned on him emotionally, and instead of redirecting that boundary, he let it continue. Marcus appreciated the honesty, though it didn't change the facts. They spoke for only a minute before Marcus continued walking. There was nothing else to say. When he got home, Elena was sitting on the couch with her hands folded tightly together. She looked like she wanted to ask where he'd been, but she stopped herself. Instead, she asked a different question, one she hadn't dared to ask yet. "Do you think we're going to be okay?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He sat across from her, not beside her, and took a moment before speaking. He told her he wasn't sure, that what happened wasn't something he could decide on overnight, that rebuilding trust, if it was even possible, would take time and consistency, not panic, not apologies. Elena nodded slowly, as if she expected that answer but hoped for something simpler. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She just absorbed the weight of his words with a quiet acceptance she hadn't shown before. Later that evening, Marcus went to the garage to grab something, and while passing the workbench, he noticed something that made him pause, a small screwdriver with Tom's initials etched near the handle. It shouldn't have surprised him, but somehow it did. Another little sign of how much Tom had been in their space. He picked it up for a moment, turning it between his fingers, and then set it down exactly where it was. It wasn't the tool that bothered him, it was the accumulation of small things that, together, drew a picture he hadn't wanted to see. Inside the house, Elena seemed to sense that he had found something, even though he said nothing about it. She approached him gently, almost cautiously, and asked if he wanted to talk. Marcus shook his head, not because he was shutting her out, but because he didn't want to talk reactively. He wanted to speak when he had something real to say. That night, Elena tried to sleep in their room again, while Marcus returned to the guest room. This time she didn't protest. She didn't stand in the doorway or ask him to stay. She simply closed her own door softly, as though accepting that forcing closeness now would only push him farther away. Around midnight, Marcus stepped into the kitchen for water and noticed the light under Elena's door. She wasn't asleep. She was pacing. He didn't need to hear words to know what she was thinking. She was replaying every moment with Tom, not the excitement or the attention, but the realization that what felt harmless in small steps had turned into something with real consequences. The next morning, Marcus walked into the living room and found Elena sitting on the couch with a notebook in her lap. When she noticed him, she hesitated before speaking. She said she had written things down, not excuses, but thoughts she needed to understand about herself. She didn't ask him to read it. She didn't try to hand it to him. She just said she realized now how gradually things had shifted, how easy it had been to tell herself the small choices weren't serious until they became something that couldn't be undone. Marcus appreciated that she wasn't packaging her words to soften the truth. She wasn't telling him what she thought he wanted to hear. She was simply acknowledging what happened with a clarity that hadn't been there before. And while that didn't fix anything, it did make him feel something he hadn't felt yet in this situation, that maybe Elena finally understood the gravity of what she had done, not in a dramatic way, not in a desperate way, but in a real, grounded way. The distance between them remained, but it felt different now, not like a punishment, but like a pause before whatever came next. The following days settled into a quiet rhythm neither Marcus nor Elena had planned for. Not tense, not explosive, just two people moving carefully around the truth that still sat between them. Elena stopped trying to fill the silence with explanations. Instead, she focused on steadiness, doing her work, keeping the house in order, giving Marcus space without making him feel pushed away or pulled back in. Marcus noticed the change, even if he didn't comment on it. He appreciated that she wasn't trying to erase what happened with rushed apologies or emotional scenes. She seemed to finally understand that trust wasn't something you glue back together, it's something you rebuild one small, consistent action at a time. One afternoon, Marcus left the guest room and found Elena sitting at the dining table sorting mail. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged, she was just there, looking more grounded than she had in weeks. She glanced up when he came in, not with expectation, but with a quiet acknowledgement. It made approaching her feel easier, so Marcus sat down across from her. For the first time since the afternoon he found her with Tom, Elena didn't flinch at the idea of a real conversation. Marcus began simply. He told her he wasn't angry in the traditional sense, he wasn't holding on to rage or looking for a reason to punish her. What bothered him most was how gradually everything had changed without him noticing. The small choices she had made, the little steps she convinced herself were harmless, the slow drift toward someone else's attention, it all painted a picture that didn't match the marriage he thought they had. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, she admitted something she hadn't said yet. She didn't even realize how far she'd let things go until the moment Marcus opened the guest room door. She said it wasn't about wanting someone else more. It wasn't even about Tom specifically. It was about slipping into a routine of seeking validation where it came easiest, instead of addressing the parts of herself she'd neglected. She spoke plainly, without dramatics or self-pity. And for the first time, Marcus believed she understood the full shape of her own actions. The turning point wasn't a single sentence, it was the tone, calm, honest, measured. 2. People acknowledging a truth instead of trying to outrun it. Later that evening, Marcus went for a walk around the neighborhood. Tom's truck was gone, not just from the driveway, but from the street entirely. A neighbor mentioned he'd left for a while, maybe to visit family. It didn't matter to Marcus either way. Tom wasn't the story anymore. Whether he returned or not had nothing to do with Marcus's next steps. When Marcus came home, he found Elena in the living room, sitting quietly with the same notebook she had shown him before. She didn't hide it. She simply placed it aside and looked at him with a steady expression, not hopeful, not defeated, just honest. She said she knew he hadn't made a decision about their future yet, and she wasn't going to pressure him. She only wanted him to know she understood the damage, and she was willing to do the work no matter how long it took, or even if the work didn't lead to the outcome she hoped for. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was just real. Marcus sat beside her, not close enough to signal something had suddenly been repaired, but close enough to show that he wasn't walking away yet. He told her he needed more time, not because he was unsure of her feelings, but because he needed to understand his own. Elena nodded, accepting the uncertainty with a maturity she hadn't shown earlier. They sat like that for a few minutes, quiet, reflective, steady. Marcus eventually stood and headed to the guest room for the night. As he reached the door, he paused, looked back at her, and said goodnight. It was simple, but it carried more meaning than she expected. She smiled softly. Good night. Nothing was fixed yet. Nothing was guaranteed, but something had shifted, not back to what it was before, and not toward an instant resolution, just toward honesty. And maybe that was enough for now. In the stillness of that night, Marcus understood something important. The betrayal had happened, the trust had been broken, and the path forward wouldn't be easy. But the story wasn't ending with a slammed door or a dramatic goodbye. It was ending with two people sitting in the same room, fully aware of what happened, fully aware of what needed to change, and quietly deciding whether they were willing to rebuild or walk separate paths. For the first time since that afternoon, Marcus felt like whatever came next would be chosen carefully, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And maybe, he thought, that was the real beginning after all.